Here we go again, and I am straight back at it with my Stomp Z3 140cc pit bike, or at least what's left of my Stomp pit bike, because last week I completely disassembled this thing in order to start fixing that broken rear subframe. And when I say I've disassembled this pit bike, this is what I'm currently left with. I have taken almost everything off it, including the engine, in order to give it as best of a cleanup as I possibly can, and obviously to get to all the little nooks and crannies in the frame to get it clean and get some fresh paint on there. But to pick up where I left off from the last video, I still need to fix this frame, because when the rear subframe was on the bike, the previous owner took it out and they managed to snap the bolts that hold the rear subframe on inside the frame, and a couple of them they've actually tried to weld, and they are proven to be incredibly difficult to actually drill those out. Let's take a look. So we've got the broken one that has attempted to have been welded previously. We've got another snapped one that I have actually managed to snap a drill bit extractor inside. There is a snapped one just there. And of course there is one snapped and welded inside the actual rear subframe piece. So obviously it was proven really difficult last time, but we're going to try one last time with the help from my dad and his magic drill bits that supposedly will drill through anything. We're going to give it another go, so let's get straight into it and let's see if we can get those bolts out of the frame. Okay, so we have managed to get through the first broken bolt. I still need to clean up the outside of that, but I do need to make that hole a bit bigger. We've managed with a 5mm bit. Now I'm going to go up to a 6mm just to widen that so we can get another bolt through. Okay, one done. Let's tackle this one. So we're going to start by making a little center hole. Okay, sit rep. So after probably about 2.5 hours worth of drilling and snapping drill bits and drilling them out and just loads and loads of drilling, we now have some holes in the bike that we can tap threads into. Let me show you. That one is now clean through, so I can either tap new threads in there or I can nut and bolt it. That one is for the engine mount anyway, so we didn't do anything to that one. This one, it was never going to go all the way through because it doesn't go straight through the frame, but we now have a hole that we can tap a thread into, and the same on the other side. Also, still need to clean that up with the angle grinder, so we'll get to that in just a minute. And the last bit left to drill out is just here on the actual rear subframe piece. So I will get to that in a minute, but I do need to set up probably a vise on the bench so that I can hold this in place to drill through it as best as possible. Okay, we have the new vise set up. The vise cost me just £16 on Temu, and I'm quite impressed with it for 16 quid. I really don't think that's too bad. I mean, can a vise be rubbish? Maybe. But for now, it is holding the frame in place, and I am going to drill through there. So once again, that was a bit of a long process, but we now have this cleaned, drilled out, ready to go. We also, over here in the vise, have a nice clean hole all the way through there. So very time consuming work and not that exciting, but very essential to get that done in order to be able to put this bike back together without the broken rear subframe. So that is now pretty much done. All I need to do is tap and die some threads through there and get some bolts so that I can actually secure that on, and that will be good to go back on. But I don't have a thread tapping kit here right now, so I will secure one of those over the next couple of days. So for the time being, I think I'm going to put the rear wheel back on, just on the bolt, so that I can wheel this thing outside, because I've finally got some connectors to set up my pressure washer. So now I can blast all the crap off of this and the flaking paint that's coming off the wheels. I'm going to try and jet all that off. Okay, never mind. I'm not going to put that back on because I just remembered how rusty this was and how tight it was to get out in the first place. So I don't really want to go messing around putting that back in. The frame is light enough. I'll just carry it outside to wash it down. So let's get that done. So we are outside and set up. If we take a quick look beforehand, this thing is absolutely filthy all over. Same goes for that rear wheel. We need to blast as much of that paint off as possible. So this is going to be a little bit of a mission. We're just going to blast as much of that off as I can. I'll probably go around it with a detailing brush, but it's not going to be a full snow foam job. As much as I like using snow foam, I just need to get all the muck off of that so that I can start getting to work on it. And just like that, the frame is now clean, or at least not covered in any mud. And while it's wet and shiny, it does look better, but what I can now see is where the paint is flaking off, where the rust is coming through and things like that. So it does now mean that I can actually work on that and add some paint to the frame. If we take a better look, it does in fact look nice from here, but as you get closer up, you've got some paint chips or rust coming through on the rear swing arm. This is all a bit faded. Again, rust coming through there. No paint and rust. It's a general story all over. And the next most concerning thing after the clean down is these wheels, because they were so rusty. Obviously all the paint just flew off during the jet wash. Let's take a look at the actual wheels and how bad they are. So obviously that rear sprocket has got to come off anyway. That is trashed. But if you look at the actual wheel, that is so rusty. The paint has literally come off, and I'm not sure if that can really be saved. Is also a similar story for the front wheel, although there is a little bit of paint that managed to hang on there, but that will come away without too much effort. And there is a slight buckle in the front wheels. So can I take that out, or do I just buy new wheels? Now, rubbing back those wheels is an option and then repainting them, but that is going to be one hell of a lot of effort to do that. It's going to be very time consuming. I don't know whether it is better to just buy a new set that come with tyres anyway, or I don't really know. We'll come back to that later on. So while I wait for the frame and the wheels to dry off before I can really do anything more with those, let's check back to my little basket of nuts and bolts that I left in the Evaporust in my ultrasonic cleaner for a few days. So they are looking a lot better, a lot cleaner. If we jump back to the video of this little bracket that I was using as a tester, use this as the main example. As you can see, that is absolutely covered in rust. So that is the before. You can see that before it was literally all over pitted and covered in rust, and now it is somewhat silvery or back to metal with the exception of a few spots. So that worked quite well. So that one came up all right with a bit of a rub down and some paint. That will be a reusable part. And the rest of the nuts and bolts cleaned up quite nicely. So obviously any spacers and things like that will be greased up before they go back in. So obviously I've managed to save most of those. Okay, so starting to get a little bit overwhelmed with this project because I've got lots of parts all over the place and I've got lots of half-finished jobs that I can't really finish until I've done other bits. Let me give you an example. So right now I have partly cleaned the engine in preparation for it to go back onto the bike. However, it cannot go back onto the bike until I have, or I don't want to put it back on the bike at least, until I have finished with the frame. And obviously to finish the frame I need to get a tap and die set, which I haven't got yet because it's still the same day as the start of the video. And obviously there's parts of the frame that I want to paint, so all of that needs doing. Also, in order to put the engine back in, this part needs to go back on to the frame. But obviously it is still in one hell of a state, so that needs cleaning down and respraying. And then of course there's foot pegs to go on that piece, there's the handlebars need redoing, there's grips, there's throttle cable, there's clutch levers, there's brake levers, there's still the wheels, the chain, the sprocket. There is still so much to do on this thing, and I'm not feeling out of my depth, but this is the first time I've ever completely stripped something to rebuild it, and I'm not very well organized, but I think I know what the next step should be. And I think the next step should be to remove these two bolts to take the suspension off, and then take the rear swing arm off, or the swing arm, so that I actually have full access to the frame and all the little bits down there, so that I can actually touch up or just repaint the frame in general. So I think I should get those off, add them to my overwhelming pile of parts, and then just keep moving forward from there. So let's get that done. Okay, so that was pretty rusted in there. That was very tight and difficult to get out. Same as the center pin for the rear wheel. Now, the only thing left to do is to remove the bolts holding on the rear brake piston or reservoir, whatever the hell that is. And that should be the rear swing arm off. Okay, with all that off, I've now added the rear swing arm, the rear brake caliper and reservoir, and the rear suspension to my ever-growing mountain of parts. Which means over here, I am not left with very much at all. We've literally got the main frame, handlebars, forks, and the front wheel still attached. And quite frankly, it looks hilarious. Now, at some point, the rest of the front end, you know, the forks, the wheel, the handlebars, all of that will need to come off. But for now, I'm leaving it attached because it's pretty easy to move around if it's still got a wheel attached. Okay, so it is a new day and I have been cracking on. The tap and die didn't really go to plan. I'm not 100%, I've never done it before, so I didn't really know what I was doing. But when I've drilled some of those out, they're different sizes and things like that, so it didn't really go to plan. I couldn't get an M8 in there, or the M8 was too loose. It just wasn't really working. So I have drilled all the way through that rear bolt. And as you can see, the frame is temporarily back in place. I have got to go and get bolts to secure it. So what the plan is, I'm going to get some Allen bolts and get a nut for the other side and just nut and bolt both of the mounting points. So if we take a look, you can see the original Allen bolt is in place. That is obviously sticking out a mile, but that is the wrong size bolt, but it's just in there so that it's holding the frame in place. So we are making progress. It is almost going back together. So a big step forward in getting that bike fixed so that I can put it back together. But unfortunately, it's not going to get fixed for the end of this video because it is late hours on a Saturday and there is just nowhere open for me to get the nuts and bolts and things that I need to get that frame on and secured in place properly. Plus, before I do that anyway, it does need a bit of rubbing back and getting some paint on there and tidying it up. So not the most exciting work at all, but very essential in order to fix that frame, because without doing that, the bike was trash. You know, it was basically just parts. But once I get those bolts now ready for the next video, then it can all go back together and we can start making this thing look like a bike again. That is all I've got time for this week because it has taken me absolutely hours just to get it as far as what I have, and I have been fitting it in around side work. Obviously, I'm still a delivery driver and we are in the run up to Christmas, so work is crazy busy at the minute and I am working as much as I possibly can to get the money in, to pay my bills and to keep all of these projects going. So if you did enjoy this video, then make sure you hit that thumbs up button. And if you are excited to see what's coming next with a pit bike, where I will start reassembling it and obviously getting the engine that's on the bench super clean and put back in, and maybe some upgrades along the way, then make sure you hit that subscribe button. And until the next video, thank you so much for watching.